The head of MS-13 on the East Coast is finally taken down, but this isn't your typical bust. Betrayal, secret deals, and a deadly fight for power unfold as the FBI closes in. Who flipped? Who's next? You won't believe how this story ends. Stick around to the very end to find out. Chapter 1. The calm before the storm. It was just another quiet morning in Manassas, Virginia. But the air felt different. A strange tension was hanging over the neighborhood. Something heavy, like the calm before a massive storm. Henrry Josue Villatoro Santos didn't know it yet, but today was the day his world was going to shatter. The sun hadn't even fully risen when the first knocks came. They weren't the usual lazy knocks of a neighbor looking for sugar or borrowing a cup of coffee. These knocks were sharp, deliberate, a signal that everything was about to change. Henry jolted awake at the sound, his heart skipping a beat. He had been living in the U.S. illegally for years, running MS-13's operations on the East Coast with an iron fist. No one had come close to catching him, but today he could feel something was different. He grabbed his phone, checking his messages. Nothing unusual. Still, the nagging feeling wouldn't leave. He was about to put the phone down when he heard it. The unmistakable sound of boots marching on the pavement, getting closer, louder. His stomach sank. "Shit, they're here," Henry muttered under his breath. Suddenly, the door of his small townhouse burst open. The air was thick with tension as armed federal agents stormed inside, rifles in hand. Henry froze for a split second, his mind racing. There was no time to think, no time to make a move. They were on him in an instant. "Henrry Villatoro Santos, you're under arrest," an agent barked, slapping the cold metal of the cuffs around his wrists. "How did you find me?" Henry growled, struggling against the agents. "You think you can just walk in here and take me down like that?" One of the agents sneered. "We've been watching you for months. You were sloppy. Too many people know who you are now." They yanked him to his feet, dragging him out of his house, ignoring his protests. Henry's mind was spinning. Who had tipped them off? Who betrayed him? As they shoved him into the back of the van, Henry's gaze flickered to his neighbor's window. He saw the familiar faces peering out, curious, confused. He knew they didn't have a clue about what he was really up to. To them, he was just a quiet guy, never causing trouble. But they had no idea. The van doors slammed shut, and Henry was thrown into the cold reality of his downfall. This wasn't just any arrest. It was the beginning of the end for MS-13's reign on the East Coast. His phone buzzed again and Henry glanced down. There was a new message. "They're coming for you next." The word sent a chill down his spine. He didn't need to look at the name to know that the walls were closing in fast. And he had no idea who was still out there watching, waiting for their turn to strike. As the van sped off, Henry clenched his fists, swearing under his breath. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Chapter 2. The Kingpin's empire crumbles. Henry's world was crashing down piece by piece. As the van rolled through the streets, the reality of his arrest began to sink in. He had been untouchable, a shadow moving in the dark, pulling the strings of MS-13's operations all across the East Coast. Now he was just another prisoner. The moment they pulled into the detention center, the doors slammed open, and he was dragged out of the van. The cold metal of the handcuffs felt like a heavy weight, a constant reminder that he wasn't the one in control anymore. "Move it, Villatoro," one of the agents barked. "We got a lot of work to do." Henry didn't speak. His mind was too busy racing, trying to figure out who had set him up. He had made enemies, sure. But who had the guts to turn on him? Who had enough power to bring him down? Inside the holding area, he was shoved into a small cell. The door slammed shut with a deafening clang. He could hear the murmurs of other prisoners, their curiosity piqued by the presence of someone like him. He sat on the cold, hard bench, hands still cuffed, staring at the wall. The walls felt like they were closing in on him. Was this it? The end of the line? Suddenly, his phone buzzed again. His heart raced as he pulled it from his pocket. A new message. "They're watching. They know everything." Henry cursed under his breath. This was no random bust. Someone had been keeping tabs on him for a long time. This was a calculated move, a trap. But who? Who had betrayed him? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching his cell. The guards were back. But they weren't alone. Pam Bondi, the U.S. Attorney General, had arrived in person to oversee the interrogation. She stood in front of his cell, looking at him with a mix of disdain and satisfaction. "We're gonna make an example out of you, Henry," she said, her voice cold and firm. "You and your gang have terrorized this country for too long. We're putting an end to it." Henry didn't flinch. He knew the drill. He had been through worse. But this felt different. This wasn't just about him. This was personal. The feds were out for blood. And they weren't going to stop until MS-13 was wiped off the map. "You think you can take me down that easy?" Henry shot back, his voice full of venom. "You're making a mistake. You don't even know who you're dealing with." Bondi's eyes narrowed, and she gave a sharp nod to the agents. "We'll see about that." As the door slammed shut behind her, Henry's mind went into overdrive. If they were coming after him this hard, it meant one thing: they were getting close to something big. The question was, what was he hiding that they didn't know about? He wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. And whoever thought they could take him down would soon learn that crossing Henrry Josue Villatoro Santos was a mistake they would regret. Chapter 3. The Betrayal That Shook the Streets. Henry sat in the cold, dimly lit interrogation room, his hands cuffed to the metal chair. The walls felt like they were closing in. He could feel the sweat on his forehead, his heart racing with every second that ticked by. He had been in this situation before. But this time something was different. Something was off. A man in a sharp suit entered the room. Agent Roberts, the one tasked with taking down MS-13. Roberts didn't waste any time. He set down a folder in front of Henry and opened it, revealing pictures of people Henry had known, worked with, and, if he was being honest, betrayed. "You think you're untouchable, huh?" Roberts said, his voice calm but full of venom. "You were one of the top dogs in MS-13. But now? You're just a prisoner. And you know what? You're gonna stay one unless you start talking." Henry glared at him, refusing to give him the satisfaction of answering. He was no snitch. He wouldn't break. But inside he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was pulling the strings behind all of this. He'd been careful, too careful. No way was this a coincidence. Roberts leaned forward, his eyes cold as ice. "You know, Henry, we've got a lot of people on the inside now. We know about the weapons stash. We know about the cash. We know everything." Henry didn't flinch. He wasn't about to give them anything. But the more Roberts talked, the more Henry's mind raced. Who in his circle had flipped? Who had betrayed him? The door to the room opened, and another agent stepped inside. This one was holding a phone. "We've got something, sir," the agent said, passing the phone to Roberts. Roberts studied the screen for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "You're not gonna like this," he said, turning the phone toward Henry. On the screen was a picture of Henry's right-hand man, Luis, his most trusted lieutenant. But that wasn't the kicker. It was the text beneath the photo. "He talks. We'll take down the whole network." Henry's stomach dropped. Luis had been loyal, at least that's what Henry had thought. But now it seemed like the walls were closing in, and the person he trusted the most had turned on him. He'd given them everything. "You've got to be kidding me," Henry muttered under his breath, his anger flaring up like a wildfire. "Luis? That snake. He was one of us." Roberts leaned back, his smug grin widening. "Looks like you've been played, Henry. Your empire's falling apart." Henry slammed his fists against the arms of the chair, his rage boiling over. He had been set up, betrayed by the one person he never thought would turn on him. The feds weren't just getting their hands on MS-13. They were dismantling it piece by piece, starting with him. "Get out of my face," Henry snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "You won't get away with this." Roberts paused for a moment, studying him with cold, calculating eyes. "We'll see about that. You can rot in here, or you can help us take down the rest of your crew. Your choice." Henry's pulse raced. He knew what they were asking. They wanted him to flip. But he wouldn't. Not for them, not for anyone. But with Luis's betrayal, Henry knew he wasn't in control anymore. The empire he had built, the streets he'd ruled, were slipping through his fingers faster than he could catch them. The storm was coming, and Henry was about to find out just how deep the betrayal went. Chapter 4. The War Inside the Walls. Henry was no longer just a man in handcuffs. He was a target. The entire MS-13 empire was on the line. And with his arrest, everything he had built was crumbling faster than he could keep up with. Inside the detention center, the game had changed. What he didn't know yet was that the betrayal didn't stop with Luis. The cell was cold and empty, but Henrry could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes on him. Rumors had already spread through the facility, news of his capture had gone viral, and the word was that the feds were ready to bring down M13 piece by piece. "Man, you're a dead man walking," a voice from the neighboring cell called out, a low chuckle following. Henrry ignored it. He wasn't scared of some random inmate, but there was something else he couldn't shake, the feeling that the walls were closing in from all sides. As the hours dragged on, Henry's mind raced. Luis had flipped. That meant one thing: there were rats everywhere. He had spent years building a tight-knit network, but now, like a sinking ship, everything was starting to leak. The higher-ups in MS-13 weren't loyal anymore, and the feds were picking them off one by one. The clang of metal echoed through the hallways. Henrry tensed. 2 guards were approaching, but they weren't alone. Behind them, a figure in a tailored suit walked with purpose: Agent Roberts, the one who had led the charge to capture him. Henrry didn't trust him, not for a second, but right now Roberts was the only one who could give him answers. Or at least he was the only one who could buy him some time. Roberts stopped right in front of the cell, his eyes locking onto Henrry. "Still refusing to talk, huh?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've got to be the most stubborn guy I've ever met." Henrry stood up slowly, his hands still cuffed, his muscles tense. "You think you've got me? You're wrong. I'm not talking." Roberts smirked. "I don't need you to talk. We're already cleaning up the mess your little gang made. The only question is, how deep do you want to bury yourself?" Henry's eyes narrowed. He knew what was coming. Roberts wasn't just going to keep him locked up. He was going to use him as bait. "If you think I'll roll over for you, you're mistaken. MS-13 doesn't break." "Oh, but it already has," Roberts shot back. "Luis gave us everything. And now it's your turn." The words hit Henrry like a slap in the face. Luis had talked, and now it was his turn. But Henrry wasn't going to make it that easy. "You think you can just come in here and break me? That's not how this works. MS-13's been around for years, and it's not going anywhere. Not even you can take us down." Robert stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. "We'll see about that." Henrry clenched his fists, his heart pounding. He wasn't going down without a fight. This was just the beginning. The war inside these walls was far from over, and the storm that was coming would hit harder than anyone expected. "You can't scare me," Henrry spat, looking Robert straight in the eye. "I've survived worse than this. You'll never take me down." As the door slammed shut behind Roberts, Henrry took a deep breath. He knew he was running out of time. The pieces were moving too fast now, and the people he trusted were the ones who would destroy him. But he wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The real fight was about to begin, and this time it was a battle for survival. Chapter 5. The betrayal that changes everything. The days in jail dragged on like a slow burn. Henry's world was shrinking, confined to a cold concrete cell. But even in the darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something bigger happening behind the scenes. Everything had changed when Luis flipped. What else was coming for him? Henrry sat on the edge of the cot, staring at the floor, replaying the scene in his head. Luis, his right-hand man, the guy he trusted more than anyone, had sold him out. The feds had everything now: the weapons, the stash, even the names. And the worst part? Luis was just the beginning. A guard came by, slamming a stack of papers on Henry's lap. "You've got visitors," he said with a grin, like he was in on some sick joke. Henrry didn't flinch, but his stomach twisted. He didn't want to see anyone, but he knew the game was changing, and maybe this was his only shot. A few minutes later, 2 men walked into the interrogation room. Henrry barely recognized them, but the cold suits and steely eyes told him everything he needed to know. These weren't just FBI agents, these guys were playing in the big leagues. "You're looking at a lot more than just weapons charges," the taller one said, his voice smooth but full of menace. "Your network's done, Henrry. We've got enough to put you away for life. But you already know that, don't you?" Henrry didn't answer. He just stared at them, calculating. His brain was running full speed. He couldn't afford to crack now. Not when everything he'd built was on the line. But there was something about the way the agent said it that made his blood run cold. "We know who you are, Henrry," the shorter one added. "We know what you've done. But we also know you've got something more, something that could take down the rest of the organization. We want it." Henry's jaw tightened. "You think I'm gonna roll over? You think I'll give you my people? You're wasting your time." The agent's eyes darkened. "We don't need you to roll over. You're not in a position to make demands anymore. You're the one who's gonna be buried under all this. And if you don't cooperate, we'll make sure you never see the light of day again." The words hit like a punch to the gut, but Henrry refused to back down. He wasn't some rookie. He had made it this far for a reason. "You can threaten me all you want, but I'm not breaking. You'll never get what you want from me." The agent leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "We already have everything, Henrry. We know what you're hiding. We know about the backup plan, the one you thought no one would ever find. The real question is, do you want to save yourself or watch everyone around you burn?" Henry's heart pounded. The backup plan? No one outside his inner circle knew about that. Luis didn't even know about it. How the hell did they find out? It hit him like a ton of bricks. There was a leak inside his operation, someone who knew everything. But who? Who told you? Henrry growled, his voice barely audible. "Who's feeding you this info?" The agent's smile was cold, knowing. "You'll find out soon enough. But for now the clock's ticking. You've got a choice. Work with us or die with the rest of your crew." Henry's fists clenched. This wasn't just a fight for his life. It was a fight for everything he had built. And if he wanted to survive, he was going to have to play a game he never thought he'd have to. But one thing was clear. There was no way out. Chapter 6. The Ultimate Betrayal. Henry's cell felt smaller every day, but he didn't care. The real war wasn't happening behind these bars. It was out there in the streets, in the shadows. And someone somewhere was still playing him like a puppet. He just didn't know who yet. The night dragged on and Henrry couldn't sleep. The thought of the feds getting their hands on his backup plan, his last trump card, was driving him crazy. He had trusted his crew for years, but now he wasn't sure who was loyal anymore. It wasn't just the feds breathing down his neck. It was the thought that someone inside his own circle had flipped. Someone he had let in. Someone who knew everything. A knock on the door broke his train of thought. It was time for another round with Agent Roberts. Henrry wasn't in the mood for his games, but there was no way out. He had to keep his head in the game no matter how much he wanted to break something. "Let's talk, Henrry," Roberts said as he stepped into the room. The agent's voice had that cold, detached edge that made Henry's skin crawl. "You know what we want. You're not getting out of here unless you give us something." Henrry leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Roberts. "You think I'm gonna help you tear my empire down? You're out of your mind. I don't owe you shit." Roberts grinned, leaning in closer. "You're right. You don't owe me anything. But you owe yourself. And you owe your people. You've got a choice, Henrry. You can play the hero and give us the information we need. Or you can rot in here and watch your empire burn to the ground." Henrry gritted his teeth. He knew the walls were closing in. Every day, more and more of his crew were getting picked off. But he wasn't ready to just fold. "Not yet. I'm not some rat," Henrry shot back, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can break me? You've got another thing coming." Roberts laughed, his tone mocking. "You're already broken. You just don't know it yet. We've got people everywhere. And that's not all. We've got a little surprise for you." Henry's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" The agent slid a folder across the table. Henrry flipped it open, his eyes scanning the pages. His pulse raced as he saw the names. His crew, his closest people, all listed as cooperating with the feds. "You're playing with fire, Henrry," Roberts said. "The game's over. And the only way you get out of this is if you help us bring down the rest of your people. You get us the names, the locations, the operations. Otherwise, we're going after them all." Henry's mind was spinning. This wasn't just an interrogation. This was war. And in war, everyone gets betrayed eventually. But this was next level. The feds had infiltrated his crew. They knew everything. He had trusted them, protected them, and now they were the ones selling him out. Who else is in on it? Henrry demanded, his voice sharp. Who's feeding you all this information? Robert smiled again, this time with a look of pure satisfaction. You'll find out soon enough. But you've got a choice, Henry. Help us and we'll make sure your fall is as soft as we can make it. Don't help us and you'll wish you never crossed us. Henry sat back, the weight of the betrayal sinking in. His empire wasn't just collapsing. It was being torn apart from the inside. And the worst part? He didn't know who he could trust anymore. One thing was for sure. He wasn't going down without a fight. But the question was, who would he fight for? His crew? Or just himself? The real enemy was already in the room. And Henry was just beginning to realize how deep the betrayal really went. Chapter 7. The last betrayal. Henry could feel the weight of the walls closing in. Every move he made, every breath he took, felt like it was under a microscope. There was no more running, no more hiding. The empire he had built was now a crumbling house of cards, and every damn card had been pulled from under him. For the past few days he'd been stewing in his cell, replaying every conversation, every handshake, every deal. Someone in his circle had sold him out. He just couldn't figure out who. His mind kept coming back to one name, Luis. But he didn't want to believe it. Luis had been with him from the start. They were brothers in arms. But now Henry wasn't so sure. The door to his cell opened abruptly. 2 guards walked in, their faces grim. Henry stood, his eyes narrowing. He knew something was coming. "Let's go, Villatoro," one of the guards said, unlocking the cuffs. "You've got visitors." Visitors. Henry's gut twisted. It wasn't his lawyer, he had no lawyer. No one was coming to save him. When he entered the interrogation room, his pulse picked up. Sitting at the table was not just Agent Roberts, but someone else, a familiar face. A face he hadn't seen in years. Luis. Henry's eyes flickered between them. His hands clenched into fists. "What the hell is this, Luis?" His voice was low, dangerous, like a predator cornered. Luis didn't say a word. His eyes met Henry's, but there was no warmth there, no loyalty. Just cold indifference. Roberts grinned like he had all the cards in his hand. "We've got a little surprise for you, Henry. Looks like your buddy Luis here has been working with us for a while." Henry felt like the ground dropped out from under him. Luis? After everything? Betrayal like that hit harder than any bullet. "You sold me out, Luis. You really did it." Luis finally spoke, his voice flat and emotionless. "I didn't have a choice, Henry. You don't understand. They know everything. They had me. You think you're the only one who's been running scared? I did what I had to do to stay alive." Henry's blood ran cold. "You're telling me that you've been playing both sides this whole time? After everything we've been through?" Luis nodded, his face hardening. "You were never gonna win. The feds had you boxed in. And I'm not gonna go down with you. I got a family, Henry. I had to make sure they were safe. You should have done the same." Henry could hardly breathe. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the ultimate backstab. His mind raced with fury, but also with a sick understanding. He'd underestimated how far his crew would go to save their own skins. "You're a coward, Luis," Henry spat. "You always were. You can't even take the fall like a man." Luis stood up, his voice rising. "I'm doing what's best for me. For my people. You should have done the same. Look where you are now. Alone. Pathetic." Roberts leaned in, relishing the scene. "This is the end, Henry. You're finished. You're nothing but a fall guy now." Henry's mind was racing. He couldn't let this be the end. But with Luis, his most trusted ally, standing there like a traitor, what could he do? The truth hit him like a punch to the gut. There was no one left. Everyone had turned their back on him. As the agents left the room, Henry sat there, his hands shaking. The game was over. The empire he'd built, the family he thought he had, was nothing but dust. And the worst part? He didn't know how he was going to survive this. Chapter 8. The Last Chance. Henry sat alone in his cell, the world outside moving on without him. It was all over, his empire, his crew, everything. He had trusted too many people, and now they were all gone, each one either in cuffs or dead. His back was against the wall, and the weight of it crushed him more than any cell ever could. For the first time, Henry felt the cold sting of reality. His life had been a series of power moves, betrayals, and bloodshed. And now, with Luis's treachery still fresh in his mind, he was nothing more than a forgotten kingpin, a shadow of the man he used to be. But then the door to his cell opened. "Henry, you're coming with me," the guard said, his tone flat like he was used to delivering bad news. Henry didn't move, didn't care. What was left to fight for? The guard didn't wait for a response. He grabbed Henry by the arm and pulled him to his feet, dragging him out of the cell. Henry's mind was numb. He had spent so long fighting for control, for power, that he hadn't realized he'd already lost. Now it was too late. There was nowhere to run. They walked down the cold, echoing halls, the sound of Henry's boots against the concrete floor like a death march. As they reached the interrogation room, Henry's eyes met the last person he expected to see, Agent Roberts. And sitting across from him, someone he never thought he'd see again. "Luis." Henry froze. "What the hell is this?" His voice was a growl, laced with fury and disbelief. Luis was sitting there, calm as could be, like he hadn't just destroyed everything Henry had built. Roberts didn't waste time. "Henry, you're running out of time. We've got everything we need. All you have to do is make the right choice." Henry's jaw tightened. "You want me to flip? You want me to take down what's left of MS-13? You think I'm gonna betray my own people?" Roberts smiled, leaning forward. "You've got two choices. Work with us and we'll give you a shot at a deal. We'll help you get out. But if you don't cooperate, we'll make sure you rot in here for the rest of your life. It's over, Henry. You know it as well as we do." Luis didn't speak. He just stared at Henry, his eyes cold, distant. It was like looking at a stranger. The betrayal was complete, and now Henry had no choice but to deal with the consequences. His own right-hand man was the one who had ended him. Henry felt his heart sink into his stomach. "You really think I'll give you names?" Henry snapped, trying to control the rage boiling inside him. "I won't do it. I'd rather die in here than sell out what's left of my crew." Roberts shrugged. "You're already dead, Henry. You just don't know it yet." Henry looked at Luis, his eyes burning with hatred. "You think you're better than me, don't you, Luis? You really think you'll walk away clean?" Luis didn't answer. His silence said everything. Henry's heart dropped. His empire was gone, and there was nothing left for him but the cold prison walls. "You don't have to do this," Henry said quietly, his voice cracking. "You could have stood by me. But now, it's too late." The agent stood up, moving toward the door. Henry sat there, staring at Luis one last time, his mind racing. The storm had passed, and Henry had lost. As the door slammed shut behind him, Henry finally let himself feel the weight of it all. The last chance for redemption was gone. Now all that was left was regret. The end of the empire, betrayed from within. Henry thought he ruled it all. But when the walls came crashing down, it wasn't the feds that took him down. It was his own people. Luis, his right-hand man, turned on him. His empire crumbled in a heartbeat, and the streets he once controlled were now just memories. In the end, Henry realized too late. Loyalty was just a word. The game was over. And Henry had nothing left but regret. If you think you've seen it all, trust me, this story isn't done yet. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss out on the next chapter of Betrayal and Power.